The market square buzzed with the usual xenophobic whispers, but Patrick Clark had heard worse. It wasn't the words that made his hand clench around his cane, but the way they were aimed, at a shivering Andromedan child. His prosthetic leg thrummed a familiar ache, a ghostly reminder of the war that spawned this prejudice. The air hung thick with the cloying sweetness of xylar fruit, cut with the sharp tang of Grallian spices, a combination that usually turned Patrick's stomach. Today, it was the undercurrent of muttered slurs, andro filth, space scum that soured the air. Tucked in a grimy alleyway, barely wider than his shoulders, a small Andromedan child huddled against the cold plasteel wall. Rhea, if the whispers he'd overheard were true, she couldn't have been more than 8 standard years. A knot of human teenagers, faces flushed with cheap synth ale and manufactured indignation, were laying into her. Their words, permeated with venom, were like physical blows. Go back where you came from, freak. One sneered, punctuating his words with a gob of spittle that landed dangerously close to Rhea's bare foot. The prosthetic leg, a constant reminder of the Battle of Kepler 186F, throbbed in protest. Images flashed through Patrick's mind. Burning cities, terrified faces, the metallic tang of blood. He'd seen enough fear, enough hate. He stopped dead, the grip on his cane tightening until his knuckles ached. "Leave her alone," Patrick rasped, his voice rough from disuse and too many synth cigs. He moved with a surprising speed for a man his age, planting himself between the Andromedan child and her tormentors. The cane, more than just an aid, became a shield. The teenagers, startled by the sudden intervention of the grizzled veteran, hesitated. "Mind your own business, old man," one spat, his bravado faltering slightly. "She's just an andro, ain't worth the synth ale she drinks." He paused, then added with a sneer, "Andro scum." They shuffled back, muttering threats and warnings about Patrick interfering again. Rhea flinched, her large, violet eyes darting nervously between Patrick and the retreating teenagers. She recoiled as he turned toward her, a mixture of fear and resentment clouding her gaze. Years of being ostracized had taught her that kindness was a rare and often dangerous commodity. Despite the years of cynicism that had hardened his heart, Patrick felt a pang of sympathy. Reaching into the worn satchel slung across his chest, he pulled out a nutrient bar he'd bought from a nearby stall. "Here," he offered, holding it out to her. Hesitantly, Rhea reached out, her small, slender fingers brushing against his. She snatched the nutrient bar and devoured it in seconds, her eyes never leaving Patrick's face. The hunger in her eyes was unmistakable, a stark reminder of her desperate situation. Patrick remembered his own childhood, orphaned at a young age and forced to scavenge for scraps. He saw a flicker of recognition in Rhea's eyes, a shared understanding of loss and isolation that transcended species. She was an orphan, he gathered from the hushed whispers of the vendors. Her parents had been killed during the final, brutal stages of the Andromedan War. She'd been living on the streets ever since, a ghost haunting the edges of the market. The market vendors, faces etched with disapproval, subtly shunned Rhea. They adjusted their stalls as she passed, whispering about her tainted blood and claiming she brought bad luck. Superstition and prejudice were potent bedfellows. "You got somewhere to stay?" Patrick asked, the words gruff, almost reluctant. He already knew the answer. I got a place, for tonight." His small, cluttered apartment wasn't much, but it was better than the alley. As they walked, Rhea unconsciously emitted a faint pulse of energy. A nearby holoscreen flickered erratically, the image distorting before returning to normal. A street lamp buzzed, then died, plunging a small section of the street into shadow. Patrick, lost in thought, didn't notice. His apartment, located in the less savory part of the city, was small and Spartan. Mementos from his military service, a faded photograph of his squad, a battered service pistol, a tarnished medal cluttered the shelves, silent testaments to a past he could never truly escape. That night, as the synth rain pattered against the windowpane, Rhea cried out in her sleep. She thrashed in the narrow cot he'd given her, her voice a frantic jumble of rapid Andromedan dialect. Patrick, jolted awake from his own restless slumber, sat up, his hand instinctively reaching for the pistol on his nightstand. The words were unintelligible, but the raw terror in her voice was universal. The apartment felt too small, too clean. Rhea huddled near Patrick, her large, amber eyes darting around the cramped space, cataloging the unfamiliar shapes and smells. The scent of citrus-based cleaning products stung her nostrils, a harsh contrast to the earthy aromas of her home, a home now reduced to scattered memories. Each hiss of a passing vehicle outside vibrated through the thin walls, amplifying her anxiety. Patrick gestured towards a corner. "Here," he mumbled, his voice rough. He dumped a pile of old blankets and flattened pillows onto the floor, creating a makeshift bed. His movements were economical, practical, devoid of any comforting warmth. He didn't meet her gaze, his focus fixed on smoothing out a frayed edge of the top blanket. The crash jolted Patrick awake. He sat up, disoriented, his prosthetic leg sending a jolt of phantom pain up his thigh. A high-pitched whine filled the air, punctuated by the crackle of electricity. Across the room, lights flickered violently, casting erratic shadows that danced across Rhea's face. The ancient refrigerator hummed erratically, spitting sparks from its corroded power cord. Rhea floated a few inches above her makeshift bed, her eyes closed, her brow furrowed in concentration. A faint blue pulse of energy emanated from her body, intensifying the electrical storm around her. The air crackled with ozone. Patrick moved slowly, cautiously, his hand outstretched. He remembered the medic's warnings about Andromedan bioelectricity. "Rhea," he said softly, his voice barely a whisper. "Wake up, it's okay." The moment his voice reached her, the flickering ceased. The refrigerator sputtered and died. Rhea gently floated back down to the blankets, her breathing shallow and uneven. The morning sun cast dusty beams through the grimy window. Patrick found Rhea standing there, her finger tracing intricate patterns on the glass. She muttered under her breath in rapid Andromedan, her words a melodic, alien cadence. She seemed oblivious to his presence, lost in a world only she could see. He tried a simple wave, then pointed to himself. "Patrick," he said slowly, enunciating each syllable. Then he mimed eating, hoping to convey the idea of breakfast. Rhea didn't react, her focus unwavering, her fingers still dancing across the glass. A wave of heat washed over Patrick as the memory assaulted him. A column of Andromedan refugees, their faces etched with despair, trudged past him on a bombed-out highway. Their homes reduced to rubble, their lives shattered. The same hollow look in their eyes that he saw in Rhea's now. A sharp rapping at the door broke the silence. "Clark," a gruff voice barked. "What the hell is going on with the power? My damn pacemaker nearly flatlined last night." The door rattled as the neighbor continued, his voice rising in anger. "And keep that thing away from the building systems. We don't need any alien pests messing things up." Patrick's hand tightened into a fist. He yanked open the door, his face hardening. "She's a child," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And she's done nothing to you. Keep your bigoted opinions to yourself." The neighbor, a burly man with a receding hairline and a permanent scowl, sputtered, then retreated, muttering about bleeding hearts and alien sympathizers. Back inside, Patrick slumped into his chair, a strange protectiveness welling up inside him. He pulled out his ancient datapad, its screen cracked and flickering. He typed in Andromedan culture, his fingers clumsy on the worn keyboard. He needed to understand. Later that afternoon, Rhea was exploring the sparse apartment when she came across a box of Patrick's belongings. She was drawn to a small, ornate music box, its paint chipped and faded. It was broken, silent, a memento from his late wife. Rhea reached out, her fingers brushing against the cold metal. Unconsciously, she channeled a sliver of her energy into the device. The gears whirred, and a haunting melody filled the room, an Andromedan folk tune filled with longing and loss. Patrick froze, his breath catching in his throat. He hadn't heard that song in years. He turned to Rhea, and for the first time he saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a spark of connection. "Come on," Patrick said, grabbing his cane. "Let's get out of here." He needed to clear his head, and maybe, just maybe, he could reach her. The park was a splash of green in the grimy cityscape. Rhea watched a flock of birds take flight, her head tilted to the side. She began to whistle, a series of high-pitched trills and warbles that mimicked the birds' calls. To Patrick's astonishment, the birds responded, circling above her head as if drawn by an invisible string. A young boy, no older than 10, hurled a rock. It struck Rhea in the shoulder, knocking her off balance. A surge of energy erupted from her, causing the nearby trees to glow with an eerie blue light. The leaves shimmered, pulsating with an otherworldly luminescence. Patrick limped forward, shielding Rhea with his body. His prosthetic leg throbbed, a dull ache that mirrored the growing weight of responsibility he felt. This was more than just helping a lost child. This was something far bigger, far more dangerous. Back in the safety of the apartment, Patrick found Rhea huddled in the corner, surrounded by scraps of paper. She was drawing again, the symbols now more complex, more intricate. He noticed something new, human letters interspersed with the Andromedan script, a growing understanding. His blood ran cold as he saw it. Emblazoned within the drawing was a stylized serpent coiled around a broken star, the insignia of the Crimson Hand, a radical Andromedan separatist group known for their violent tactics and unwavering hatred of humanity. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. What have I gotten myself into? Patrick wondered, the question echoing in the hollow spaces of his mind. He'd taken in strays before, cats mostly, wounded birds once. But an Andromedan child, potentially connected to a terrorist group. This was a different level of complication. He pulled up a data pad, the harsh blue light illuminating the lines etched on his face, and began to research the Andromedan separatist movement. Images flashed across the screen, bombed-out human settlements, defiant Andromedan soldiers, propaganda posters filled with anti-human rhetoric. The reports detailed their brutal tactics, their unwavering commitment to a radical anti-human agenda. He scrolled through accounts of bombings and assassinations, a knot tightening in his stomach. He watched Rhea from the corner of his eye. She sat on the floor, fiddling with the broken music box, her brow furrowed in concentration. Was it possible? Could this child be connected to such violence? He found himself observing her more closely, a subtle shift in his gaze, a flicker of doubt clouding his features. He hesitated before reaching out to adjust the blanket around her shoulders, a brief moment of uncertainty before his hand settled gently on her back. Rhea sighed, frustration evident in the set of her small shoulders. She pressed her fingers against the music box, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. The high-pitched whine of the broken mechanism intensified, and a faint tremor ran through the room. Patrick noticed small objects rattling on the nearby shelves, a chipped teacup vibrating precariously close to the edge. He tried to distract her. "Hey," he said, his voice gentle. "How about we try some words?" He pulled out a stack of old children's books, their pages worn and faded. "This is cat," he pointed to a picture of a fluffy feline. Rhea stared at the image, her multifaceted eyes unblinking. She tried to mimic the sound, her voice a soft, guttural rasp. "Cat," she repeated, the K sound catching in her throat. Patrick smiled encouragingly. "Almost more like cat." They continued like this for an hour, a clumsy dance of sounds and gestures. Progress was slow, but Patrick found himself enjoying the challenge, his patience surprisingly unwavering. He flipped to a page with a picture of soldiers marching in formation. Rhea gasped, recoiling as if struck. Her eyes widened in terror, and a choked sob escaped her lips. She scrambled backward, pressing herself against the wall, her body trembling uncontrollably. Patrick immediately closed the book, his heart pounding in his chest. He realized he needed help. He sent a coded message to an old military friend, Lena Hansen, now working as a xenolinguist at a university on the other side of the continent. Need discreet consultation. Urgent. He waited, his leg throbbing with a familiar ache. A few days later, he drove Ria to a secluded area outside the city, a place he used to come to clear his head after particularly rough deployments. The air was crisp and clean, filled with the rustling of leaves and the gentle murmur of a nearby stream. He hoped the change of scenery would calm her and provide a safe space for her to explore her abilities, if she even had any. Ria sat by the stream, her gaze fixed on the flowing water. She extended her hand, her fingers twitching slightly. The water began to swirl and dance, rising in small, controlled bursts, then gently falling back into the stream. Patrick watched, a mixture of awe and apprehension swirling within him. Suddenly, a shimmering light enveloped Ria, and a holographic image flickered into existence before them. It was a lush, vibrant landscape, filled with towering trees, exotic flowers, and crystal-clear waterfalls. An Andromedan city, bathed in the warm glow of a binary sunset. Ria reached out, her fingers brushing against the holographic leaves, a look of longing and homesickness etched on her face. A wave of nausea washed over Patrick, and a fragmented image flashed through his mind. A similar holographic projection, a makeshift oasis in the middle of a war-torn desert, a desperate attempt to cling to sanity. He blinked, the vision fading as quickly as it had appeared. Lena agreed to meet, but her message was terse. "This is risky, Pat, be careful." They met at a deserted roadside diner, the only other occupants a lone trucker nursing a cup of coffee. Lena, her face pale and drawn, slid into the booth across from them. "You know what you're doing is insane, right?" She whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the ventilation system. Harboring an Andromedan, especially one with unknown abilities, Lena pulled out a small device and scanned Ria, who was quietly drawing on a paper placemat. Those energy pulses, they matched the description. She trailed off, her eyes widening in disbelief. "The separatist insignia she keeps drawing, it's tied to a prophecy, an Andromedan child possessing immense power who will either save or destroy their people." Patrick frowned. "Save or destroy, that's a bit dramatic, isn't it?" Lena shook her head. "This isn't some fairy tale, Pat, this is real, and the separatists, they believe this child is the key to their victory." Patrick looked around, but Ria had wandered off and was drawing in the dirt outside using Lena's pen. He followed her outside. Ria had drawn a map, a surprisingly detailed rendering of a location he recognized from the datapad research, an area near the separatist camp. He knelt beside her, his voice tight. "Ria, what is this?" He pointed to the separatist insignia, a stylized serpent coiled around a broken sword. Her expression clouded over, her small hands clenched into fists. The energy pulses emanating from her body intensified, causing Lena's equipment inside the diner to flicker and sputter. Suddenly, a wave of images crashed into Patrick's mind, overwhelming him with their intensity. He saw a city engulfed in flames, buildings collapsing, Andromedan civilians screaming in terror. He felt the heat of the fire, smelled the acrid smoke, tasted the metallic tang of blood. It was Ria's memory, a telepathic projection of her past trauma. He stumbled backward, gasping for air, his knees going weak from the onslaught of information. He understood now. The fear, the distrust, the nightmares. She wasn't a threat, she was a victim. Lena rushed outside, her face etched with fear. "Pat, we need to turn her over now, before things get out of control." He straightened his back, his gaze hardening. "No, Pat, you don't understand the danger." "I understand perfectly," he interrupted, his voice firm and unwavering. "I'm not abandoning her. I'll protect her from anyone who tries to exploit her, human or Andromedan." He turned to Lena, his expression resolute. "This conversation is over." He picked up Ria, cradling her gently in his arms, and walked away, leaving Lena standing alone in the dusty parking lot, her face a mask of disbelief and fear. "It's all right, Rhea," Patrick said, his voice a low rumble, his hand gently stroking her hair. "It was just a vision. They can't hurt you here." He felt the tremor in her small frame, the residual echoes of the telepathic onslaught. "I understand more than you know what it's like to be afraid, but I won't let anything happen to you." The map Quinn had given him burned in his pocket. He had to know what was out there, what kind of threat they were facing. "I need to check something out," he said, more to himself than to Rhea. "There's a separatist camp indicated on this map. I need to see what they're planning." A cold knot tightened in his stomach. He hated leaving her, but he couldn't protect her without knowing the enemy. He helped Rhea settle on the worn sofa, pulling a threadbare blanket around her shoulders. "I'll be back soon," he promised, trying to sound more confident than he felt. He checked the locks on the door and windows, reinforcing them with energy clamps he'd salvaged from his mercenary days. "Stay here. Don't open the door for anyone. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, hide." He hated giving her such grim instructions, but he had no choice. The area on the map led him to the outskirts of the city, a desolate industrial zone choked with rusted machinery and crumbling concrete. He found it, or what was left of it, an abandoned communication relay station, its skeletal frame reaching towards the smog-choked sky. Separatist graffiti, crude and angry, defaced the walls. A chilling wind whistled through the broken windows, carrying the scent of decay and despair. Inside, the station was a gutted mess. Consoles were smashed, wires hung like severed veins, and the air crackled with the faint scent of ozone. But something drew him further in. He found it in the central server room, a hidden compartment behind a wall of twisted metal. Inside were several data logs, their surfaces cold to the touch. They were heavily encrypted, but the separatist symbols etched into their casings were unmistakable. And something else, a nagging feeling in his gut, a sense of wrongness that went beyond the immediate danger. Back in the apartment, the encrypted files taunted him. He ran decryption algorithms, the hum of the ancient computer filling the small space. Hours crawled by. Then a breakthrough. The files spilled open, revealing names, dates, and schematics. And then the bombshell, Rhea's parents, high-ranking members of the separatist group, instrumental in planning several attacks. The words swam before his eyes, each one a blow to his gut. Could he trust her? Was she a weapon waiting to be triggered? He looked at the sleeping child on the sofa, her face pale and innocent. The conflict raged within him, tearing at his dedication. Rhea, meanwhile, was trying to focus. She sat cross-legged on the floor, a small metal cube floating in front of her. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she strained, trying to manipulate it, to turn it, to feel its weight in her mind. But it was like trying to grasp smoke. The cube wobbled erratically, then clattered to the floor. Frustration welled up inside her. Suddenly, a voice, faint and distorted, echoed in her mind. Capture, the girl, prophecy, power. The thoughts were fragmented, fleeting, but the intent was clear. Fear slammed into her, cold and sharp. She gasped, clutching her head. The effort, the terror, was too much. A surge of raw energy erupted from her, a blinding flash that overloaded the apartment's power grid. The lights flickered, sputtered, and died, plunging the room into darkness. A low hum filled the air, followed by the acrid smell of burnt circuits. The building groaned around her, the sudden silence amplifying her fear. Patrick's gut twisted as he approached the building. The darkened windows, the oppressive silence, something was terribly wrong. He broke into a run, his prosthetic leg thumping against the pavement, each step a hammer blow against his rising panic. He found Rhea huddled in a corner, her eyes wide with terror. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I heard them, in my head. They want to capture me." She recounted the fragmented thoughts, the chilling intent that had pierced her mind. Patrick cursed under his breath. He'd been a fool to think they could stay here, that they could hide. The separatists were hunting her, and they weren't osing in. "We need to move," he said, his voice tight with urgency. Now, he moved quickly, efficiently, his military inane kicking in. He grabbed his weapons, a battered pulse rifle and a sidearm, checking the power cells. He stuffed a medkit and some ration packs into a backpack. He tried to keep his voice calm, reassuring, but the fear was a tangible thing, a suffocating presence in the small apartment. "It's going to be all right, Rhea. We're going to get out of here." As they reached the door, it burst inward, splintering the frame. 3 figures stood silhouetted against the dim hallway, their faces hidden by masks, their weapons raised. "There she is." One of them snarled, his voice distorted by a vocoder. Patrick reacted instantly, shoving Rhea behind him. He fired a burst from his pulse rifle, the energy bolts tearing through the hallway, forcing the separatists to duck for cover. He used his prosthetic leg to sweep the legs out from under one of the attackers, sending him crashing to the floor. "Run, Rhea, go." Rhea hesitated for a moment, her eyes wide with fear. Then she acted. Focusing all her desperation, all her terror, she lashed out with her mind. One of the separatists, the one closest to Patrick, suddenly found his weapon ripped from his grasp, flung against the opposite wall with bone-jarring force. But the force was uncontrolled, wild. A nearby table shattered, sending shards of wood flying. The air crackled with raw energy. They scrambled out of the apartment into the darkened hallway. The remaining separatists were hot on their heels, their weapons spitting energy bolts. Patrick led the way, his prosthetic leg pounding against the stairs, Rhea struggling to keep up. They burst out of the building and into the night, the city lights blurring around them. The chase was on. They weaved through the crowded streets, Patrick using his knowledge of the city to navigate the maze of alleys and back streets. But the separatists were relentless, their pursuit growing ever closer. Patrick realized with a sinking heart that they were being herded, pushed towards a specific location. A trap. They found themselves in an abandoned warehouse district, a desolate landscape of crumbling brick and broken glass. The separatists had them cornered. Figures emerged from the shadows, surrounding them, their weapons trained on them. There was no escape. A figure stepped forward out of the darkness. He was tall and gaunt, his face pale and intense. He removed his mask, revealing a face that was both familiar and alien. "Rhea," he said, his voice a low, hypnotic drawl. "Come home, it is your destiny." He paused, and a cruel smile touched his lips. "I am your uncle, and you are destined to fulfill the prophecy and lead our people to glory." Degradation. A voice, smooth and oily, cut through the lingering static of the ruined comms. "Such a waste of potential. Rhea, child, don't listen to this. This butcher." Patrick squinted, the warehouse's dim light reflecting off a figure stepping from the shadows, an Andromedan male, tall and imposing, with the familiar cranial ridges of Rhea's species. But this one wore ornate armor, etched with symbols of a forgotten war. "I am Vorlag, your uncle, and I've come to offer you the truth." Vorlag extended a hand, his gaze locked on Rhea. "Your parents. They weren't mere members of the separatist movement. They were its founders, visionaries who fought for Andromedan independence, betrayed by human lies and greed." He spat the word human like venom. "That's not true," Patrick snapped, his hand tightening on the discarded plasma rifle he'd scavenged. The prosthetic in his leg throbbed, a dull echo of past betrayals. Vorlag ignored him, his violet eyes softening as he looked at Rhea. "You possess an even greater telepathic potential than they did, child. You are destined to lead our people to a new era of power." He presented a sleek silver device humming with scarcely controlled energy. "This will amplify your gifts, unlock your true potential." "Don't touch it, Rhea," Patrick warned, his voice low and dangerous. "These separatists, they use violence, they don't care who gets hurt." He remembered the bombed-out cities, the faces of the dead human and Andromedan alike. Rhea's lower antennae drooped, her face a mask of confusion. I don't know what to believe." She glanced from Vorlag to Patrick, her eyes wide with fear. "The prophecy speaks of one who will merge her consciousness with the wellspring." Vorlag continued, his voice taking on a hypnotic quality. An ancient Andromedan artifact hidden away for generations. It will grant you unimaginable power. Patrick felt a cold dread creep up his spine. The wellspring, that's a weapon, Rhea. A weapon of mass destruction, banned by the Galactic Council. He'd seen the schematics once, during his service, a device capable of wiping out entire planets. Hidden, yes, during the war in places like this warehouse. A sudden surge of energy crackled in the air. Heavy footsteps echoed outside. It seems our discussion is over, Vorlag said, a cruel smile twisting his lips. My forces have arrived to ensure your cooperation. Separatist soldiers clad in black armor materialized at every entrance, weapons raised. The warehouse felt smaller, the air thick with tension. Escape routes vanished in an instant. Patrick scanned the environment, his mind racing. Years of combat had honed his senses, sharpening his instincts. The warehouse was old, poorly maintained. Rhea, can you feel the structure of this place? He murmured, his voice barely audible above the rising din. Weak points, places we can exploit. He ripped a power cell from a downed separatist rifle, his fingers moving with practiced speed. I need a few minutes, distract them. He glanced at his prosthetic leg, and hold this. He detached the leg from its socket, handing it to Rhea. Rhea looked horrified. What are you doing? Trust me. Patrick took the power cell from Rhea, then grabbed a discarded comms unit. I'm about to make a big noise, literally. Patrick began stripping wires from the prosthetics control panel, his movements precise and efficient. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he bypassed safety protocols, rerouting power. This is going to be messy, he muttered, but it'll buy us some time. With a final surge of energy, Patrick slammed the power cell into the modified comms unit. The device sputtered, then emitted a high-pitched whine that grew into a deafening shriek. A wave of electromagnetic energy pulsed outwards, frying circuits and short-circuiting weapons. Chaos erupted. Separatist soldiers screamed as their armor locked up, their rifles useless. Lights flickered and died, plunging sections of the warehouse into darkness. Now. Patrick yelled, grabbing Rhea's hand. Move. Rhea, her eyes glowing with barely controlled power, raised her hands. Jagged chunks of debris, metal, concrete, wood levitated, forming a path through the wreckage. Patrick, firing the plasma rifle he'd scavenged, provided cover. Each shot a burst of emerald energy. A figure emerged from the chaos, untouched by the EMP. Vorlag, shielded by a personal energy field, strode towards them, his eyes fixed on Rhea. Rhea hesitated, her face etched with doubt. The weight of her parents' legacy, the potential consequences of her actions, seemed to paralyze her. Vorlag reached for her. Come, child, embrace your destiny. Patrick lunged, tackling Vorlag with a desperate roar. They crashed to the ground, the plasma rifle flying from Patrick's grasp. Run, Rhea, now! Rhea watched, frozen, as Patrick grappled with her uncle, the energy shield crackling around them. Then she made her decision. Trust. It was a foreign concept, but looking at Patrick, seeing his selfless sacrifice, she knew what she had to do. Rhea focused her mind, channeling her telekinetic power. The warehouse groaned, metal screaming in protest. With a final surge of energy, she collapsed a section of the roof, creating a cloud of dust and debris. The warehouse plunged into near darkness, but the escape route was blocked. Amidst the chaos, Rhea felt a hand grab her arm, pulling her away. Vorlag's voice, cold and triumphant, echoed in her ears. You cannot escape your destiny, child. Patrick, his head ringing, pushed himself up from the rubble. He was alone. The warehouse was swarming with separatists. Then he saw it, a narrow passage, concealed behind a fallen stack of crates. A hidden route, perhaps, or something more sinister, a hint of a deeper conspiracy involving the warehouse itself. But the only thing clear was that Rhea was gone. The passage was a claustrophobe's nightmare. Barely wide enough for his shoulders, the corrugated metal walls pressed in, reeking of stale coolant and ozone. Water dripped from unseen pipes, each drop echoing in the oppressive silence. Patrick moved slowly, his prosthetic leg finding purchase on the slick, uneven floor. The air hung thick and still, tasting of dust and forgotten maintenance. This wasn't just a shortcut. It was a forgotten artery of the warehouse. The tunnel opened abruptly into a small, circular chamber. Banks of flickering monitors lined the walls, displaying grainy images of the warehouse interior, the loading docks, even the market square outside. A tangle of wires snaked across the floor, connecting the monitors to a central processing unit humming with barely suppressed power. He ran a gloved hand over the console, dust motes dancing in the dim light. This wasn't just surveillance, it was obsession. A closer inspection of the console revealed schematics for modified pulse rifles, energy dampeners, and even schematics for small spacecraft, alongside encrypted data logs detailing shipments to various off-world coordinates. One file, labeled Project Chimera, contained holographic blueprints of what appeared to be a heavily weaponized space station. This wasn't just a warehouse, it was a forward operating base for something far larger and far more dangerous. A metallic clang echoed from the tunnel behind him. Patrick froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the plasma pistol holstered at his hip. Footsteps, heavy and purposeful, grew louder. They knew he was here. He had seconds. He plunged back into the tunnel, scrambling deeper into the labyrinthine network. Rhea stared out the viewport of the transport, the swirling nebulae a kaleidoscope of impossible colors. But the beauty was lost on her. Vorlag sat opposite her, his reptilian eyes unwavering. The hum of the engines vibrated through her bones, a constant reminder of her captivity. "We are approaching the moon of Xylos," Vorlag announced, his voice a low rumble. "Soon you will fulfill your destiny." "Destiny," Rhea spat, her voice barely a whisper. "Or your ambition." Vorlag steepled his fingers, his gaze unwavering. "The artifact on Xylos is the key to our survival. It requires a telepath of your lineage, your strength, to unlock its power. Only then can we cleanse our worlds of human influence." "Cleanse," Rhea's voice rose, imbued with anger. "By unleashing a weapon of unimaginable destruction. Is that what my parents would have wanted?" Vorlag's expression hardened. "Your parents understood the sacrifices necessary for our people. They dedicated their lives to finding and protecting the artifact. And you think they would want me to become a conduit for a weapon?" Rhea challenged. "They wanted peace." Vorlag leaned forward, his voice a low hiss. "Peace is a luxury we can no longer afford. The humans have taken everything from us. This is the only way to reclaim our birthright." Patrick cursed under his breath. The tunnel branched in 3 directions, each path as dark and foreboding as the last. He pulled a crumpled schematic from his pocket, a map he'd snagged from the surveillance chamber. It showed the warehouse layout, the tunnel system, and a secondary exit point near the perimeter fence, heavily guarded. But it was his only shot. He reached into his pack and pulled out the damaged communication device he'd found near the entrance. The screen was cracked, the antenna bent at an unnatural angle, but with a few deft movements, a lifetime of tinkering, he managed to bypass the damaged circuits, rerouting power to the transmitter. It was a long shot, but he might be able to send a distress signal on a restricted frequency, one used by independent contractors and salvage crews. The transport lurched slightly, a barely perceptible deviation from its course. Rhea focused her mind, subtly manipulating the navigation system. A few minor adjustments, barely enough to register as an error, but enough to delay their arrival, to buy Patrick time. "Atmospheric interference," Vorlag muttered, glancing at the navigation console. "Increase the security around the prisoner." The guards flanking Rhea tightened their grip on their pulse rifles. Patrick watched the comm device's screen flicker, a single bar of signal strength appearing and disappearing. He sent a short, encrypted message. "Warehouse 7, weapons manufacturing, separatist activity. Require immediate assistance." He hit send, then killed the power, plunging the device back into darkness. Had anyone received it? And if they had, who was on the other end? Vorlag activated a holographic projector, bathing the transport cabin in a soft blue light. A recording shimmered into existence. Ria's parents, their faces etched with worry, speaking directly to her. "Ria, my darling," her mother's image said, her voice tinged with static. "The artifact is our last hope. You must embrace your destiny, harness your power, and save our people." "We know this is a heavy burden," her father's image added, his voice grave. "But you are strong, Ria. You are our only hope." Ria stared at the recording, her heart pounding. Something was wrong. The light in her mother's eyes seemed forced, the inflection of her father's voice unnatural. She closed her eyes, focusing her telepathic senses, reaching out to the echoes of their presence in the recording. There it was, a subtle distortion, a manipulation of their words, a lie woven into their image. Patrick reached the secondary exit. Two figures stood guard, clad in separatist armor, pulse rifles at the ready. But something was off. One of them was human, the other an andromedan. "I knew you would try to contact someone," Vorlag said, his voice permeated with amusement. "I have taken steps to ensure your efforts are unfruitful." A transmission crackled over the transport's comm system on the same restricted frequency Patrick had used. A voice, cold and mechanical, filled the cabin. "Attention, unidentified vessel. Separatist activity detected. Cease all transmissions and prepare to be boarded. Resistance is futile." The glint of cheap chrome on the guard's belt buckle caught Patrick's eye, a human mercenary, no older than 20, sporting the crude separatist insignia. A kid, barely old enough to shave, selling himself to monsters. A bitter taste rose in Patrick's throat. He could disarm him, try to reason. But time was a luxury Ria couldn't afford. His prosthetic thrummed, a phantom ache mirroring the weight in his chest. Patrick moved, not with the youthful exuberance of the mercenary, but with the cold, efficient precision of a man who'd seen too much death. A swift, silent takedown, a pressure point behind the ear, a muffled grunt, and the kid slumped to the floor. No time for regrets. He stripped the mercenary of his uniform, the fabric rough and unfamiliar against his skin. The discarded weapon, a standard-issue pulse rifle, felt like a lead weight in his hand. Meanwhile, deep within the transport, Ria's fingers danced across the control panel. The transport's navigation system was already compromised, feeding false coordinates to the separatist pilots. Now she focused on the communication array, rerouting signals and injecting a complex, coded message into the data stream, a desperate plea for help, broadcast on a frequency only the Andromedan resistance knew. Vorlag, pacing impatiently in the cockpit, noticed the flicker on the comms panel. "Insignificant interference," he muttered, dismissing it with a wave of his hand. "The moon's energy is disrupting the signal. Nothing to worry about, we're almost there." He glanced back at Ria, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Soon, child, you will fulfill your destiny." Clad in the ill-fitting mercenary uniform, Patrick stepped out of the transport, attempting to blend in with the warehouse guards. The air hung thick with the stench of fuel and ozone. He walked with a practiced swagger, trying to mask the stiffness in his gait. "Hey, you!" A gruff voice barked from behind. A separatist officer, his face scarred and weathered, approached him, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Report. Security breach in the lower levels. Sensor malfunction. What do you know?" Ria, her mind still connected to the transport systems, overheard Vorlag's communication with another separatist leader. The distorted voice crackled through the comms, revealing the artifact's true purpose. Capable of destabilizing planetary cores. A single activation could shatter entire systems. The Alliance will crumble. A wave of nausea washed over Ria. A vision flooded her mind, planets cracking apart, their molten cores spewing into the void, entire civilizations extinguished in an instant. The weight of the galaxy settled on her small shoulders. She had to stop them. "Malfunctioning sensors, sir," Patrick said, forcing a casual tone. "Probably a rat chewed through the wiring. I was just heading down there to take a look." He offered a lazy salute, hoping his deception would hold. The officer's gaze lingered, unconvinced. "See to it personally, and report back immediately." He turned and walked away, leaving Patrick with a knot of dread in his stomach. The transport shuddered as it broke through the atmosphere. Through the viewport, Rhea saw a desolate moon, its surface scarred by ancient craters, dominated by a colossal structure that loomed in the distance. An Andromedan temple, its obsidian spires piercing the inky sky. Vorlag gripped Rhea's arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "We're here," he hissed, ignoring her protests. "The ritual must begin immediately. The moon's energy will amplify the artifact's power. There is no more time for games." Patrick, using the mercenaries' access codes, bypassed the security grid and opened the perimeter gate. The warehouse complex stretched before him, a maze of corridors and storage bays. He needed to find a way off this rock. Tucked away in a forgotten corner of the warehouse, he discovered a hidden hangar. Inside, a sleek black separatist fighter ship sat dormant, its wings folded, its engines cold. A flicker of hope ignited in Patrick's chest, a means of escape. But the ship was in disrepair, its hull scarred, its systems offline. Rhea was dragged into the heart of the temple. Before her stood the artifact, a colossal crystalline structure, humming with raw energy. The air crackled with power, its resonance vibrating through her bones. The artifact pulsed with a malevolent light, its energy overwhelming her senses, threatening to shatter her mind. "Initiate the sequence," Vorlag commanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Activate the weapon." Rhea stood defiant, her small frame trembling. She closed her eyes, focusing her mind, channeling her fear, her doubt, her desperate plea for help. She projected her emotions outward, flooding the minds of the separatists with images of destruction, of regret, of the futility of their actions. Confusion rippled through the chamber. Patrick wrestled with the fighter's control panel, sparks flying as he bypassed damaged circuits. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life, filling the hangar with a deafening din. Alarms blared, bathing the hangar in red light. He was running out of time. A laser beam seared past his head, narrowly missing him. A separatist sniper, perched on a catwalk above, had him in his sights. Patrick dove for cover behind the fighter, the pulse rifle bucking in his hands as he returned fire. Suddenly, a new signal blared across the comms system. An unknown ship decloaked near the moon, its hull gleaming in the dim light. It had intercepted Rhea's coded message. A voice, clear and strong, echoed through the temple. "We have received your signal. Assistance is on the way. Intruders." A separatist comms officer shouted from the bridge of their ship. "An unknown vessel is approaching the moon." The warning crackled over Vorlag's comm, cutting through the chaos in the temple. His eyes widened with fury. "Fools, they will not interfere. The ritual will proceed." Interfere. Patrick hurled himself behind the ruined bulk of the fighter, the sniper's energy rounds chewing chunks of plasteel from its already battered hull. Whine, then impact. He risked a glance. The sniper held a steady bead on his position from a high window overlooking the makeshift courtyard. He needed to break that line of sight. He scrabbled for the discarded separatist rifle he'd liberated earlier, its power cell still half-charged. A quick adjustment, a desperate prayer, and he aimed at a fuel tanker parked haphazardly near a transport vehicle. One shot. The resulting explosion was a messy, satisfying roar of fire and shrapnel, forcing the sniper to relocate. The warehouse shook. Inside, Rhea fought. Not with weapons, but with her mind. She channeled every ounce of her telepathic strength, trying to disrupt the artifact's activation sequence to overload its systems. A high-pitched whine emanated from the device, the lights in the temple flickering erratically as energy surged and bucked. Vorlag snarled, his reptilian eyes narrowing. Insolent whelp. He saw the instability. the feedback threatening to tear the artifact apart. With a brutal shove, he forced Rhea onto the activation dais, pinning her arms with cruel strength. From a pouch on his belt, he produced a neural override device, its needle-tipped probes glinting in the artifact's growing light. Taking advantage of the chaos, Patrick sprinted toward the perimeter fence, the weapon slung across his back. Two more guards, alerted by the explosion, emerged from a side door, weapons raised. He dropped into a combat crouch, firing short, controlled bursts, dropping them both before they could react. The air crackled with spent energy and the acrid smell of burnt flesh. Then a sound, a high-pitched keening that vibrated through his bones. The separatists around him staggered, clutching their heads. Comms chatter dissolved into static. The incoming ship. They'd arrived. The separatists' own anti-aircraft cannons swung around, targeting the incoming vessel. But before they could lock on, a volley of plasma fire erupted from the ship, tearing through the separatists' ranks. One of the AA guns exploded in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Rhea, seizing the opportunity amidst the communications blackout, focused all her will, reaching out with her mind, a desperate telepathic SOS aimed at the approaching ship. "Help us. The artifact. Temple. Coordinates locked." Patrick reached the perimeter fence. No time for finesse. He slammed his prosthetic leg against the base, using the momentum to propel himself upwards, the magnetic clamps in his artificial limb biting into the metal mesh. He scrambled over the top, ignoring the grinding pain as the leg's servos strained under the sudden load. Something gave with a sickening crack. He landed hard on the other side, the prosthetic protesting with a jolt of phantom agony. Inside the temple, Vorlag, his face contorted with rage, jammed the neural override onto Rhea's head. She screamed, a sound swallowed by the artifact's rising hum. The device pulsed with violet light, forcing her to initiate the final sequence. The artifact responded, its glow intensifying, bathing the temple in an unearthly radiance. A low rumble vibrated through the moon's surface, growing into a series of tremors. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ancient stone floor. Patrick, outside the warehouse, saw the light, felt the tremors. He knew. It was too late. Or was it? He had to get back inside. He had to try. A sleek, black drone detached from the incoming ship, its engines humming with contained power. It streaked towards the temple, a silver bullet against the alien sky. Patrick reversed course, charging back towards the warehouse, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He burst through the side door, surprising the remaining guards. Close quarters combat. A knife flashed in his hand, a silent dance of death amidst the chaos. He moved with a brutal efficiency, years of training overriding the pain in his leg. Improvised weapons, a wrench, a length of pipe became instruments of destruction. The drone, guided by Rhea's telepathic beacon, hurtled towards the temple, separatist fire lancing around it. Explosions rocked the lunar surface, each near-miss sending shrapnel tearing through the air. As the drone neared the temple, it began emitting a high-frequency counter-signal, a wave of energy designed to disrupt and neutralize the artifact's power field. Inside, Rhea screamed again, a raw, animalistic sound of pure agony. The artifact's glow flickered, weakened, but the pain was unbearable. Vorlag, realizing the drone's purpose, roared in fury. He ripped a plasma pistol from his holster, aiming to obliterate the device. But before he could fire, a figure slammed into him from the side, knocking him off balance. Patrick, the human, was back. A fist connected with Vorlag's jaw, a solid thud that echoed through the temple. The fight was not nearly finished. Patrick staggered back, the impact of Vorlag's armored fist reverberating through his skull. The warehouse air, thick with dust and the metallic tang of blood, hung heavy in his lungs. Vorlag, a mountain of muscle and rage, advanced, each step shaking the already unstable floor. Patrick dodged a clumsy swipe, the wind of it ruffling his hair, and feinted left, hoping to draw Vorlag off balance. He was too slow. Vorlag's hand clamped around his wrist, the grip like a vice. A high-pitched whine pierced the air. Vorlag roared, momentarily distracted, his grip loosening just enough for Patrick to wrench free. He risked a glance. Rhea, eyes squeezed shut, face contorted in pain, had lifted a stack of metal crates with her mind, sending them hurtling towards Vorlag. The crates slammed into Vorlag's chest, staggering him. Vorlag bellowed, swatting the remaining crates aside like toys. He turned, his gaze locking onto Rhea. Patrick knew what was coming. He lunged, throwing himself in front of Rhea just as Vorlag's fist connected. Pain exploded in his side, a searing agony that stole his breath. He crumpled to the ground, vision blurring. Above the din, a high-pitched whine intensified into a piercing shriek. The drone. It had broken through. A beam of pure energy lanced from the drone, striking the artifact dead center. The room vibrated, the tremors intensifying. The artifact pulsed with erratic light, its energy field flickering wildly. The very air crackled with nearly unleashed power. Rhea screamed, clutching her head, her body spasming. The neural override was fighting her, tearing at her mind. But beneath the surface of her pain, a flicker of defiance ignited. She pushed back. Patrick, gasping for air, saw his chance. Vorlag, momentarily stunned by the energy surge and Rhea's psychic scream, stumbled. Patrick scrambled to his feet, ignoring the white-hot pain in his side. He focused on his leg, the cold, unfeeling metal, the one constant in his life. With a grunt of effort, he unclipped the locking mechanism, severing the connection at the knee. Vorlag blinked, confusion warring with rage on his brutish face. Before he could react, Patrick swung. The prosthetic leg, a dense cylinder of reinforced steel and composite polymers, connected with Vorlag's jaw with a sickening thud. Vorlag staggered, his eyes rolling back in his head. As Vorlag crashed to the ground, Patrick seized the Separatist's weapon, a crude but powerful energy rifle. He aimed it at the artifact, his hands shaking. One shot. That was all he needed. He squeezed the trigger. A beam of raw energy ripped through the artifact, shattering it in a blinding flash of light. A shockwave of pure force erupted, throwing Patrick and Rhea back against the warehouse wall. The drone, its emitter overloaded by the sudden energy surge, sputtered and died, crashing into the ground near the warehouse with a muffled boom. The warehouse groaned, its structural integrity compromised. Metal shrieked and concrete crumbled. "Rhea, we have to go," Patrick yelled, pulling her to her feet. They stumbled towards the exit, the building collapsing around them. Vorlag remained where he fell, buried under tons of rubble. They burst out of the warehouse just as the roof caved in, sending a plume of dust and debris billowing into the night sky. Standing before them, bathed in the harsh glare of floodlights, was a landing party, Andromedans. They were clad in sleek gunmetal gray armor, their faces obscured by tinted visors. One of them stepped forward, her voice clear and precise, speaking in flawless English. "Patrick Clark, I am Captain Alara. We received a telepathic distress signal. Rhea." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the scene. What happened here? Why was the artifact destroyed? Rhea, swaying on her feet, exhaustion etched on her face, straightened her shoulders. "They were going to use it as a weapon," she said, her voice hoarse but firm. "To kill people." Patrick stopped them. Captain Alara inclined her head, her visor reflecting the flickering flames from the burning warehouse. "Sensors indicate residual energy signatures consistent with a disrupted artifact field," she stated, her tone neutral. "And evidence of separatist activity." Alara turned her attention back to Patrick. "We can offer you medical assistance, Mr. Clark, and safe passage off this moon." Her gaze flickered to Rhea. "We are also tracking Andromedan extremists in this sector. Any information you can provide would be appreciated." Patrick leaned heavily on a piece of salvaged metal, his side throbbing. He looked at Rhea, then back at Alara. "I accept your offer, Captain, but I have some questions of my own about that artifact. And about who exactly these extremists are working for." He narrowed his eyes, suspicion hardening his features. "I think this goes a lot deeper than you know." "Safe," Alara finished, her violet eyes fixed on the swirling nebula outside the viewport. The bridge was silent save for the low hum of the engines, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd left behind. "Captain," Patrick began, his voice tight, "with all due respect, I need to know what's going on. That artifact. It was more than just a power source, wasn't it?" Alara turned, her gaze hardening. "Trust is earned, human, and your species has a long history of breaking it with mine." Patrick shifted his weight, the prosthetic leg protesting with a familiar throb. "Ria's safety is paramount. We both saw what those separatists were willing to do. I'm not asking for ancient history lessons. I'm demanding full transparency about what we're dealing with." A long silence stretched between them before Alara relented, her shoulders slumping slightly. "Very well, the artifact. It was of ancient Andromedan origin, passed down through generations of keepers. It holds immense power, power that the Ascendants crave to reshape the galaxy in their image." She gestured towards a turbolift. "This vessel will take us to a secure location. You will both be scanned, assessed. Then perhaps I will share what little I know." The ship was a marvel of Andromedan engineering. Sleek, obsidian-like surfaces flowed seamlessly into shimmering energy conduits. Ria gasped, her eyes wide with wonder. It's beautiful." Patrick, however, remained cautious, his gaze sweeping over the consoles, his mind cataloging every detail, every potential weapon, every escape route. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something else. Something ancient and subtly alien. Inside the medical bay, a complex array of scanners whirred to life. A cool gel was applied to Patrick's skin as the machine began its work. He could feel the sensors probing, mapping the scars that crisscrossed his body, the legacy of a war he desperately wanted to forget. The results flickered on a nearby screen. Alara's brow furrowed. "Your injuries, extensive. Human prosthetics are primitive compared to our medical technology." "They get the job done," Patrick grunted, clenching his fist. "There's also a lingering energy signature within your prosthetic, linked to the artifact's energy pulse. It's faint but concerning." Ria, who had been watching the scan with fascination, stepped forward, her brow furrowed. She reached out a tentative hand towards the scanner, her fingers hovering just above the surface. An image of the ship's schematics appeared, and then the ship began to rotate to show different sections. "The energy flows. Like water, it wants to go. There." She pointed to a section deep within the ship's core. Alara stared at her, her violet eyes wide with surprise. How did you know that?" I don't know," Ria stammered, pulling her hand back. "I just felt it." Alara recovered quickly, her expression hardening. "The Ascendants," she said, her voice low, "they seek to weaponize artifacts like the one at the outpost. They believe that by doing so, they can incite intergalactic war, ushering in a new era of Andromedan dominance." "And what makes them think they can pull that off?" Patrick asked, his gaze sharp. "They're separatists, not a galactic superpower. Where are they getting the resources?" Alara hesitated, her expression troubled. "There are elements within both human and Andromedan societies who sympathize with their cause. They provide funding, technology, intelligence." "And Ria?" Patrick pressed. "What does she have to do with all this?" "The Ascendants believe she is a key," Alara said grimly. "Her unique telepathic abilities. They believe she can unlock the full potential of the artifacts, control them, weaponize them." Patrick frowned, considering the information. He scrolled through the data logs from the ship's computer. A series of encrypted communications caught his eye. He focused his attention, using a decryption algorithm he'd picked up during his military service. The message dedicationed into an image of Alara's second-in-command, Lieutenant Valerius, meeting with a known Ascendant operative. "Captain," Patrick said, his voice hard, "you might want to take a look at this." He forwarded the image to Alara's console. Alara studied the image, her face paling. This is impossible. Valerius is a loyal officer." "Is he?" Patrick countered, his voice flat. Or is this fabricated evidence planted by the Ascendants to sow discord? Before Alara could respond, a piercing alarm blared throughout the ship. Red lights flashed and the ship lurched violently. "Sensors detect multiple unidentified vessels approaching our location," a voice announced over the comm system. "Bearing 227 Mark IV. Estimated time to intercept 3 minutes." Alara's eyes widened. "Ascendant fighters, prepare for evasive maneuvers. All hands to battle stations." As the ship twisted and turned, dodging laser fire, Patrick saw Valerius in the corridor. He was frantically rerouting power from the shields to the weapons array. A smirk played on his lips as he disconnected the life support system. Valerius looked at Patrick. "For the glory of the Ascendants." Before Patrick could react, Valerius lunged forward, a stunner pistol in his hand. The shot hit Alara instead, sending her sprawling. "Rhea is our key," Valerius hissed, ignoring Alara, "and soon the Ascendants will control this galaxy." Despite his injuries, Patrick moved with surprising speed, tackling Valerius to the ground. The two men grappled, exchanging blows in the narrow corridor. The ship shuddered violently as it sustained heavy damage. During the chaos, Rhea was thrown against a wall. When she got up, she was alone. She stumbled through the damaged ship, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt a pull, a strange energy resonating deep within the ship's core. She followed the feeling down a narrow passageway she hadn't noticed before. It led to a hidden chamber, bathed in a soft, pulsing light. The air hummed with energy, the same energy she had felt at the outpost and within Patrick's prosthetic leg. She was drawn towards a crystalline structure in the center of the room, an unknown force pulling her forward. Outside, the Ascendant fighters closed in, their weapons charged. Rhea reached out and touched the crystal. A surge of energy coursed through her body, engulfing the ship in a blinding light. The world dissolved into a cacophony of screeching metal and flashing emergency lights. Patrick slammed against the console, the breath knocked out of him as the ship bucked violently. Alarms wailed, a discordant symphony of impending doom. He tasted blood, a metallic tang mixing with the recycled air. Groaning, he hauled himself up, his prosthetic leg protesting with a jolt of phantom pain that threatened to buckle his knee. Sparks rained down from a ruptured conduit near the navigation console. "Report," he barked, his voice raspy. His gaze swept across the bridge, shields. Compromised, the indicator flashed a malevolent red. Weapons. Offline. Rhea was slumped against the far wall, her small frame trembling. But it wasn't fear that radiated from her, it was energy. Her silver eyes glowed with an unnatural light and a faint, shimmering aura pulsed around her. Alara remained motionless in her command chair, the impact having rendered her unconscious. "Damn it," Patrick muttered. He was on his own, or rather they were. He had to assume command. Now, the ship shuddered again, closer this time. Brace for impact. Ascendant fighters, sleek and predatory, swarmed the viewport, their weapons spitting emerald fire that chewed away at what remained of the shields. They were exploiting the vulnerability, pressing their advantage with cold, calculated precision. "Evasive maneuvers," Patrick yelled, grabbing the helm. He wrestled the ship into a series of desperate rolls and dives, the G-forces threatening to crush him. "Reroute auxiliary power to shields. Weapons, I need weapons online." The response was a chorus of error messages and flickering displays. The energy surge had scrambled everything, turning the ship's sophisticated targeting systems into useless slag. He couldn't even lock onto the enemy fighters, let alone fire. I see them," Rhea stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "They're shifting, changing direction." Patrick glanced at her, skepticism warring with desperation. "What are you talking about?" "They're anticipating our moves," she explained, her eyes still glowing. I can feel it. They're going to come at us from the port side, below the engine cluster." He hesitated, then acted, trusting his gut and this strange girl. He yanked the helm hard to starboard, sending the ship into a stomach-churning barrel roll. Just as Rhea had predicted, an Ascendant fighter screamed past their previous position, its weapon's fire narrowly missing the engine nacelle. "Now!" Rhea cried. "Fire!" Patrick smacked his palm on the manual override, channeling every ounce of power he could muster into a single, desperate volley. The ship's remaining laser cannons roared to life, spewing a concentrated beam of energy that slammed into the lead fighter. The Ascendant vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light and debris. One down, but more were coming. From the corner of his eye, Patrick saw Valerius stir in his restraints. The Andromedan's eyes were alight with malicious glee. "Foolish human," he hissed, his voice raspy. "You think you are protecting her. You are merely delaying the inevitable. The Ascendants are not after the girl, they want the ship. It holds the key." Patrick frowned. "The key to what?" "To everything," Valerius spat. "To the artifacts, to the portals, to the power that awaits." A chill ran down Patrick's spine. He knew about the artifacts, the ancient Andromedan relics scattered across the galaxy. He'd heard whispers of their power, whispers he'd dismissed as myth, but Valerius's words, they carried a weight of truth. "They intend to use this ship to create a network," Patrick realized, his voice grim. "A network of portals that will allow them to control everything." Rhea gasped, clutching her head. "The energy, it's flowing through me," she whispered, her voice filled with terror. I'm a conduit." Patrick stared at her, horror dawning. She wasn't just connected to the energy surge, she was the source. She was the key to activating the portal network. He had a choice to make, a terrible, impossible choice. He could try to protect Rhea, but in doing so, he would risk unleashing unimaginable power into the hands of the Ascendants, or he could initiate self-destruct sequence, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "What?" Rhea cried, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I'm sorry, kid," Patrick said, his gaze hardening. "But I can't let them have this ship. I can't let them use you." He moved to the self-destruct console, his fingers hovering over the activation button. "We'll use the escape pods. There's a human settlement on Kepler 186F. We'll be safe there." But as he reached for the button, a red light flashed on the console. "Self-destruct sequence disabled," the computer announced in a cold, mechanical voice. "External override detected." Valerius chuckled, a low, guttural sound that echoed through the bridge. "Did you really think it would be that easy, human?" Before Patrick could react, the ship lurched violently as the Ascendant fighters launched a boarding party. The sounds of explosions and weapons fire echoed through the corridors. "They're here," Rhea whispered, her voice trembling. "They're coming for me." Patrick grabbed his pulse rifle, his prosthetic leg digging into the deck plating. "Not if I can help it." He looked at Rhea, her eyes filled with fear, and then at the unconscious Alara. He was one man injured against an army of Ascendant warriors, but he wouldn't back down. He couldn't. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice firm. "We're not going down without a fight." The first Ascendant warrior burst onto the bridge, clad in black armor and wielding a plasma rifle. Patrick opened fire, the rifle bucking in his hands. The warrior staggered but didn't fall. Rhea screamed, and a wave of energy pulsed outwards, knocking the warrior off his feet. They fought back to back, a desperate dance of survival against overwhelming odds. Patrick, his body screaming in protest, used every trick he knew, every ounce of training he possessed to keep the Ascendants at bay. Rhea, her eyes glowing brighter with each passing moment, unleashed bursts of raw energy that sent the warriors flying. Suddenly, Rhea froze, her eyes widening in shock. I hear them," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the din of battle. "Their leader. He's ordering them to capture me alive, at all costs. They want to weaponize me." Patrick's blood ran cold. Weaponize her. What did that even mean? Then Rhea spoke again, her voice filled with a chilling recognition. It's Counselor Morvis," she said, her voice trembling. "He's the one in charge, he's the leader of the Ascendants. The Andromedan Council, betrayal from the highest level." Patrick felt a surge of anger, hot and primal. This wasn't just about artifacts and portals. This was about power. And someone he thought he could trust was behind it all. Plasma fire sizzled past Patrick's ear, vaporizing a section of the corridor wall. The Ascendant soldiers, clad in their obsidian armor, advanced relentlessly, their weapons spitting emerald bolts. He ducked behind a mangled service panel, the metallic tang of ozone filling his nostrils. He'd rigged the corridor with magnetic mines scavenged from the armory. As the first wave of Ascendants rushed through, Patrick triggered the detonators. A series of concussive blasts ripped through their ranks, sending bodies flying. He emerged from cover, his pulse rifle barking, picking off the survivors struggling to regain their footing. Rhea's energy signature flared down the corridor. Wild, uncontrolled bursts of violet light pulsed from her position, sending Ascendants staggering and clutching their heads. Her powers were potent but raw, unpredictable. One stray blast sheared through a support beam, sending sparks cascading down. The Ascendants, however, were not deterred. They regrouped, their advance unwavering. Patrick cursed. They were bypassing strategic locations, heading straight for the engine room. The ship's portal drive, that was their objective. Rhea, they're after the drive, Patrick yelled, firing a volley of grenades down the corridor. We need to stop them from using it. I'll try to reset the self-destruct, she replied, her voice strained. But the override. It's tied directly into the core system. I need to get inside. Patrick grimaced. I'll hold them off. Get to the core. He sprinted towards the engine room, the ship shuddering violently as Ascendant boarding pods slammed against the hull. Reaching the engine room access, he found it a charnel house. Elite Ascendant soldiers, their armor reinforced with energy shields, stood guard behind a barricade of twisted metal. Patrick activated his optical camo, blurring his outline against the flickering emergency lights. He moved like a wraith, flanking the barricade, his prosthetic leg thrumming with each step. He launched a sonic grenade, disorienting the Ascendants, then charged, his combat knife flashing. The battle was a brutal dance of steel and plasma. He parried blows, dodged energy blasts, his movements honed by years of war. He used his prosthetic leg to sweep the legs from under one Ascendant, then drove his knife into the soldier's exposed neck joint. Another lunged at him, but Patrick sidestepped, grabbing the Ascendant's arm and using his momentum to hurl him into the barricade. He fought with a ferocity born of desperation, his every strike fueled by the need to protect Rhea. Finally, the last Ascendant fell, his armor rent, his lifeblood spilling onto the deck. Patrick stood panting, his body aching, his armor scorched. But the engine room was secure. He checked the ship's navigation console. Locked, course plotted directly towards the space station. He was too late. He activated his comm. Rhea, what's your status? Static crackled. Then her voice faint but clear. Patrick, I can't reset it from here. The override is hardwired. I need you to get to the core. He didn't hesitate. He fought his way back through the ship, the corridors littered with the wreckage of war. Finally, he reached the entrance to the core, a heavily guarded chamber pulsating with raw energy. Before him was Rhea, with the entrance protected by a shimmering energy barrier and automated gun emplacements. I can disrupt the energy flow, Rhea said, her voice tight with concentration. But I need you to disable the turrets. Patrick nodded. He pulled out his multi-tool, his fingers dancing over the controls. Give me a window. Rhea focused her energy, creating a momentary disruption in the energy barrier. Patrick seized the opportunity, scrambling past the barrier and taking cover behind a conduit panel. He bypassed the turret targeting system, feeding it a false signal. The turrets sputtered, their barrels drooping uselessly. Now, he yelled. Rhea unleashed a concentrated blast of energy, shattering the energy barrier. They rushed into the core chamber. Inside, a holographic projection flickered to life. Counselor Varkas, his face etched with arrogance, stared down at them. Rhea, Varkas said, his voice smooth and persuasive. Come home. The council has need of your talents. Join us and you will be honored, respected. Powerful, Rhea stood firm, her eyes blazing with defiance. I know what you truly want, counselor. You want to control me. To use my power for your own selfish ends. I will not be your weapon. You disappoint me, child, Varkas hissed. Very well. If you will not join us, you will be eliminated. He gestured, as will this human. Varkas activated a security lockdown. Energy shields slammed into place, sealing the exits. Alarms blared, the ship vibrating as it hurtled towards the space station. We're trapped, Patrick yelled, smacking his fist against the energy shield. Not yet, Rhea said, her voice determined. I can feel the ship's power grid. If we reroute the energy, we can overload the shields. Working together, they raced through the core chamber, rerouting power conduits, bypassing safety protocols. The air crackled with energy, the temperature rising rapidly. Finally, with a surge of power, the energy shields flickered and died. They emerged from the core chamber to find the ship had docked inside the space station. Ascendant soldiers swarmed the corridors, their weapons trained on them. And standing before them, his face contorted with rage, was Counselor Varkas. Seize the girl, Varkas roared. Alive, eliminate the human. Patrick and Rhea stood back to back, facing an army of ascendants. The cold vacuum of space pressed against the station walls, a silent witness to the coming battle. The world erupted in white. Patrick shoved Rhea behind him, the concussive wave slamming into his back. He tasted ozone, felt the sizzle on his exposed skin. Ascendant soldiers staggered, weapons clattering against the metal floor. Shield, he barked, his voice hoarse. Rhea's eyes squeezed shut, her brow furrowed in concentration. A shimmering, translucent dome bloomed around them, deflecting the initial volley of plasma fire that lanced through the dissipating flashbang residue. The shield flickered, strained, but held. He could feel the heat radiating from it, smell the singed ozone clinging to Rhea's hair. Move. Patrick propelled her forward, using the momentary chaos to their advantage. They scrambled into a narrow corridor, diving behind a stack of stacked cargo containers. The containers were scarred with laser burns, the air thick with the metallic tang of ionized particles. Patrick slapped a hand against his temple, activating his neural implant. The station's schematics flooded his vision, a complex web of corridors, access points, and security checkpoints. He filtered the data, searching for escape routes, weaknesses in the Ascendant security grid. Maintenance Tunnel Sector 4, he muttered, highlighting a narrow passage on the schematic. Less guarded, but heavily shielded. Rhea's breathing was shallow, ragged. The shield, I can try. Don't, Patrick cut her off, his voice firm. You're already drained, we need you. He ran a hand along the cool metal of a nearby container, his mind racing. The tunnel was their best bet, but that shield. He glanced down at his prosthetic leg, the chrome and plasteel gleaming in the dim light. An idea, reckless and desperate, sparked in his mind. Rhea, cover me. He knelt, ignoring the familiar phantom ache in his missing limb, and began to work. With practiced movements, he detached the lower portion of his prosthetic, exposing the intricate network of wires and power conduits beneath the synthetic skin. He ripped out a handful of fiber optic cables, rerouted power feeds, his fingers flying with a speed born of years of battlefield improvisation. What are you doing? Rhea asked, her voice imbued with concern. Making a door, he grunted, splicing two wires together. A spark jumped, momentarily illuminating his grim expression. An EMP, small scale but enough to fry that shield for a few seconds. He reattached the modified prosthetic, a crude, jury-rigged device now jutting from his leg. Ready? Rhea nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and trust. Patrick took a deep breath and lunged forward, slamming the modified prosthetic against the shielded entrance. A high-pitched whine filled the corridor, followed by a crackling surge of energy. The shield flickered violently, then died, plunging the tunnel entrance into darkness. Now, he shouted, grabbing Rhea's hand and pulling her into the narrow passage. The tunnel was cramped, the air thick with dust and the smell of stale coolant. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. Behind them he could hear the shouts of the Ascendant soldiers, their heavy boots pounding against the metal floor. "He's close," Rhea whispered, her eyes wide with alarm. "Varkas, I can feel him." Patrick cursed under his breath. He knew Varkas was powerful, but to sense Rhea through the station. They reached a junction, 2 tunnels branching off into the darkness. Patrick consulted the schematic again, his fingers tracing the faint lines. "Docking bay that way," he pointed to the left, restricted research lab to the right. "Docking bay is safer," Rhea said, her voice barely a whisper. "Safer but a dead end," Patrick countered. "They'll expect us to run, the lab. It's a risk, but it might have something we can use." He paused, his gaze hardening. "We need an edge." He chose right. The research lab was a chaotic mess of discarded equipment, sparking wires and half-finished projects. Consoles blinked erratically, displaying cryptic data streams. In the center of the room, a large, cylindrical device hummed with nearly unleashed energy. It was covered in warning labels written in both Andromedan and human script. "What is that?" Rhea asked, her voice filled with apprehension. "Prototype cloaking field generator," Patrick replied, reading the nearest label. "Experimental. Requires a specific energy signature for activation." He ran his hand along the device's casing, searching for a control panel. "Damn, needs a direct neural interface." I think I can do it," Rhea said hesitantly, "but it will take a lot of energy." "Can you channel your energy into it?" Patrick asked, his eyes searching hers. Rhea nodded, her expression determined. She stepped forward, placing her hands on the cool metal of the generator. Her eyes glowed with an ethereal light, and a faint hum resonated through the lab. The generator sputtered, then roared to life, bathing the room in a soft blue light. "It's working!" Patrick exclaimed, relief flooding his face. As the cloaking field activated, a shimmering distortion enveloped the lab, rendering everything within invisible to the naked eye. They were hidden, but for how long? They moved deeper into the lab, their footsteps muffled by the cloaking field. As they passed a deactivated comm station, they overheard a distorted voice, unmistakably Varkas. "The girl is proving more elusive than anticipated. Increase security on all sectors. I want her alive. Her abilities will usher in a new era for the Ascendancy." Another voice, cold and calculating, responded. "The Council is growing impatient, Varkas. They demand results. Weaponizing her abilities will solidify our control over the galaxy." Rhea gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes welled with tears, her face pale with horror. He wants to use me." Patrick placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, his expression grim. "He won't, not if I have anything to say about it." Varkas's voice, closer now, cut through the air. "I can sense her. The cloaking field is masking her visual presence, but her energy signature, it's unmistakable." Patrick cursed under his breath. The cloaking field wasn't enough. Varkas could still track them. "He's right outside," Rhea whispered, her voice trembling. Cornered, Patrick scanned the lab, his eyes landing on the cloaking generator. An idea, desperate and dangerous, formed in his mind. "Hold on tight," he said, grabbing Rhea's hand. He accessed the generator's control panel, rerouting the power flow, overriding the safety protocols. "This is going to be rough." With a final adjustment, he set the generator to overload. The device began to vibrate violently, the air crackling with energy. "What are you doing?" Rhea cried out, her voice barely audible above the escalating whine. "Buying us some time," Patrick shouted back. The generator exploded in a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar. The force of the blast threw Patrick and Rhea against the far wall, knocking the wind out of them. The cloaking field dissipated, revealing the lab in its disheveled state. Dazed, Patrick pushed himself to his feet, his ears ringing. He could see several Ascendant soldiers lying unconscious on the floor, their armor scorched and smoking. Varkas was slumped against a console, his face contorted in pain. "Are you all right?" he asked Rhea, helping her up. She nodded slowly, her eyes wide with shock. As she regained her bearings, her gaze landed on a symbol etched into the wall behind the console. It was an intricate design, a series of interlocking circles and triangles. "That symbol," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and trepidation. "I've seen it before. In my dreams." The darkness pressed in, thick and disorienting. A high-pitched whine echoed in Patrick's ears, overlaid with the acrid smell of ozone. He blinked, his eyes struggling to adjust to the near-total blackness. "Rhea," he rasped, his throat dry. He reached out, his hand brushing against something small and trembling. "I'm here," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "What happened?" "Energy surge," Patrick grunted, pushing himself to his feet. His prosthetic leg throbbed in protest. "Blew out the lights. Stay close." He activated the emergency light on his wrist console, casting a weak circle of illumination that barely pierced the gloom. The beam danced across twisted metal and sparking wires. They were in a section of the lab he didn't recognize, a narrow corridor lined with inactive consoles. As his eyes adjusted, he noticed a seam in the wall, almost invisible in the poor light. He ran his hand along it, feeling for a release. His fingers found a recess panel. He pressed it, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, stacked neatly, were data files and crystalline memory shards. He pulled one out, holding it up to the light. Andromedan script covered its surface. "What is it?" Rhea asked, peering over his shoulder. "Information," Patrick replied grimly, "and I don't think it's good news." He activated his console's translation matrix and began to scan the file. The data scrolled across his screen, revealing detailed genetic information, schematics, and research notes. "This is about you, Rhea, your genetic lineage, your potential abilities." He paused, his expression hardening. "It seems you're not exactly a typical Andromedan." The files confirmed that Rhea was the result of a secret Andromedan program designed to create enhanced beings for military applications. The program had been spearheaded by Varkas. Patrick turned to Rhea, his voice low. This changes things. You were engineered, Rhea, bred for war." Rhea recoiled, her eyes wide with dis-no-if. "Number." "That's not true." "I'm sorry, kid," Patrick said, his voice softening. "But it is, and it gets worse. There's a secure server room further down the corridor. I'm betting it contains a backup of all this data, including Varkas's communications and plans." They moved cautiously down the darkened corridor, reaching a reinforced door with a complex security panel. Patrick tried to bypass it with his console, but the system was heavily encrypted. "Damn it," he muttered. "This is going to take too long." "I can help," Rhea offered hesitantly. I can feel the energy in the system. I might be able to interface with it." Patrick hesitated. "It could be dangerous." "We don't have a choice," Rhea insisted, her voice firm. She stepped forward, placing her hand on the security panel. Her eyes glowed with an eerie light as she focused her energy. A wave of energy pulsed from her hand, washing over the panel. Alarms blared momentarily before abruptly cutting out. The door hissed open. Rhea staggered back, clutching her head. It hurts," she gasped. "Easy," Patrick said, supporting her. "You did good." Inside the server room, rows of humming servers lined the walls. Patrick moved to a central console, attempting to download the data to expose Varkas's conspiracy to the Andromedan Council. The system responded with a series of error messages. "He's locked it down tight," Patrick said in frustration. Rhea, still pale but recovering, stepped forward again. "Let me try." She closed her eyes, focusing her energy. The servers hummed louder, and the air crackled with static electricity. Data streams cascaded across the screens, bypassing the encryption protocols. "I'm in," she whispered, her voice strained. As the data downloaded, they uncovered a horrifying truth. Varkas planned to trigger a galaxy-wide war by manipulating both human and Andromedan forces. He was using the station as a staging ground for a series of false flag operations, designed to ignite old hatreds and spark new conflicts. The symbol Rhea had seen in her visions was a key to unlocking her full potential, but it also made her a target for anyone who wanted to control her. Then amidst the data streams they found a hidden message, a personal log entry from Rhea's mother, a scientist who had worked on the program. Her image flickered on the screen, her face etched with worry. "Rhea," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "If you're seeing this, it means I failed. Varkas is not to be trusted. He will stop at nothing to achieve his goals. Resist him, Rhea. You are stronger than you know. Your power is not a weapon but a gift. Use it wisely." The message ended abruptly. Rhea stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. She tried to protect me," she whispered. Patrick placed a hand on her shoulder. "She did, and now it's our turn to finish what she started." As they were processing the information, Patrick detected a change in the lab's ambient temperature. "We need to move now," he said urgently. Following the tactical display on his wrist, Patrick led Rhea through the maze of corridors until they reached a hidden escape pod bay. The bay was small, containing only 2 single-person escape pods. "This is our way out," Patrick said, relief evident in his voice. As they prepared to launch the escape pod, the bay doors hissed open and a group of Andromedan scientists entered, their faces etched with fear and commitment. Leading them was Dr. Aris Thorne, a tall, gaunt Andromedan with haunted eyes. "You must not leave," Thorne said, his voice urgent. "Varkas plans to use Rhea as a biological weapon to destroy human colonies. He will frame it as an act of Andromedan retaliation, pushing both sides into a full-scale war." "We know," Patrick said grimly. "We downloaded the data." "Then you understand the stakes," Thorne said. "We can help you escape and provide you with the evidence to expose Varkas, but we need your help. Rhea, you must use your powers to override the escape pod security protocols. Varkas has locked them down remotely." Rhea hesitated, then nodded. "I'll do it." She stepped forward, placing her hand on the pod's control panel. As she focused her energy, a surge of power coursed through her, triggering a failsafe. Alarms blared throughout the station. "He knows we're here," Thorne said, his voice permeated with panic. "He's activated a self-destruct sequence on the escape pods." Suddenly, Varkas's image appeared on a comm screen, his face twisted with rage. "Rhea," he snarled, "you cannot escape your destiny. I have activated a device that will amplify your powers, making you an uncontrollable weapon. You will be the instrument of humanity's destruction." Patrick realized the horrifying truth. Varkas was willing to sacrifice the entire station, everyone on board, to ensure Rhea's destruction or capture. "There's only one way to stop him," Thorne said, his voice grim. "We must disable the station's central power core. It's heavily guarded, but it's the only way to prevent him from using that device." Patrick faced a difficult decision. He could try to escape with Rhea, warn the human colonies, and hope they could prepare for the coming attack. Or he could stay and fight, try to disable the power core, and risk everything to stop Varkas's plan. Rhea looked at him, her eyes filled with a newfound perseverance. "We have to stay," she said, her voice firm. "I won't let him use me as a weapon. I won't let him destroy anyone else." Patrick studied her face, seeing the strength and grit in her eyes. He knew it was a suicide mission, but he also knew it was the right thing to do. He nodded, his teeth clenched. "Then we stay," he said, his voice resolute. "Let's go finish this." "All right," Patrick said, his voice low and grim. "Thorne, your schematics paint this place like a damn maze, but Varkas is predictable. He'll be holed up near the central power core. It's the heart of this station, and he won't leave it unguarded. We go in quiet, exploit the blind spots, and hit him hard." Thorne projected a flickering holographic schematic of the station's power grid onto the wall. Lines of pulsing energy snaked across the image, marking security checkpoints and patrol routes. The core is located deep within the station, Section Gamma 7. Numerous security checkpoints, heavy patrol activity, minimal access points. Rhea, her brow furrowed in concentration, touched the schematic. There is something else, a hidden energy. It pulses beneath the core like a second heartbeat. Her voice was barely a whisper filled with unease. It is shielded, but I can feel it. Patrick nodded, his gaze hardening. Another layer of Varkus's bullshit. Thorn, anything on the schematics about that? Thorn shook his head. Nothing. My data is incomplete. Varkus likely added this after the initial construction. Then we go in blind, Patrick stated, his voice firm. Let's gear up. They scavenged the abandoned lab, repurposing tools and forgotten weapons. Patrick found a discarded pulse rifle, its energy cells depleted, and managed to jury-rig a makeshift charger using spare parts from a defunct medical bay. Thorn located a set of thermal goggles and a sonic disruptor, while Rhea fashioned a crude energy amplifier from salvaged components, hoping to enhance her powers. With their makeshift arsenal assembled, they began their infiltration. The ventilation shafts were cramped and dusty, the air thick with the stale scent of decay. Deserted corridors stretched before them, the silence broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the station's failing life support systems. They rounded a corner and stumbled upon a patrol of Varkus security forces, 4 heavily armored Andromedans wielding energy rifles. Patrick reacted instantly, shoving Rhea and Thorn behind a stack of crates. Now, he barked, unleashing a volley of pulse fire. The guards returned fire, energy bolts searing the air. Patrick used his tactical skills to outmaneuver them, taking cover behind pillars and flanking their position. He dropped one with a precisely aimed shot to the head, then another with a burst to the chest. Thorn joined the fray, unleashing a sonic blast that disoriented the remaining guards, allowing Patrick to finish them off. Cameras, Rhea whispered, her eyes glowing faintly. She focused her powers, and the red lights of the surveillance cameras flickered and died, creating a temporary window of opportunity. They pressed on, reaching a security checkpoint guarded by a hulking Andromedan cyborg, its body encased in gleaming metal armor and armed with a heavy plasma cannon. The cyborg scanned them with its glowing red eyes, its mechanical voice booming. Intruders detected. Halt or be terminated. Patrick cursed under his breath. We can't take that thing head on. We need another way. Thorn consulted his schematic. There's a maintenance tunnel to the east. It bypasses this checkpoint, but it's not on the schematics. I only know about it from my time working here. What's the catch? Patrick asked, his hand resting on his pulse rifle. It's infested, Thorn said grimly. Varkus used it for his experiments. Mutated creatures roam those tunnels. We don't have a choice, Patrick replied. Let's go. The secret passage was a narrow, twisting tunnel filled with dripping pipes and the stench of decay. The air grew heavy, thick with the buzzing of unseen insects. Then they saw them, grotesque creatures with elongated limbs, razor-sharp claws, and glowing red eyes. They lunged from the shadows, hissing and snarling. Rhea unleashed a wave of energy, incinerating several of the creatures, but the attack drained her, leaving her panting and weak. Patrick and Thorn fought back to back, firing their weapons and striking with their fists. The creatures were relentless, their mutated bodies resistant to energy fire. Patrick noticed Rhea faltering. We need to move, he yelled. They fought their way through the tunnel, Rhea struggling to keep up. Finally, they emerged into a deserted corridor, gasping for breath. Rhea collapsed against the wall, her face pale and drawn. I need to rest, she said weakly. Patrick scanned the corridor. No time. Thorn, check the schematics, find us something to slow them down. Thorn pointed to a control panel on the wall. Gravity regulators. We can manipulate the station's gravity in this section. Patrick grinned. Perfect. Let's make things a little disorienting. He accessed the panel and input a series of commands. The gravity in the corridor began to fluctuate wildly, throwing them off balance. He could hear the sounds of the mutated creatures struggling behind them, their movements hampered by the shifting gravity. That should buy us some time, Patrick said. Let's move. They pressed on, finally reaching the power core chamber. It was a massive room, filled with complex machinery and pulsing with raw energy. A squad of elite Andromedan soldiers stood guard, their weapons trained on the entrance. Suddenly, a holographic display flickered to life, revealing Varkus's sneering face. "So, you made it this far," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Impressive but futile, you're trapped now." He activated the core's automated defense systems. The chamber sealed shut, trapping them inside. Energy barriers rose from the floor, segmenting the room into smaller sections. Alarms blared and the core began to emit a high-pitched whine. "The power core is overloading," Thorn yelled. "It's going to blow." Varkus laughed. "Indeed, and with it you and any hope of finding this station." "Did you really think you could stop me, fool?" He paused, a cruel glint in his eyes. "You see, the power core is not just a power source. It also powers a cloaking device, one that is hiding this station from the human fleet. Once I leave, you will be destroyed and I will be able to continue my work in peace." Rhea closed her eyes, focusing her powers. "The symbol. The one I saw in my vision. It is a resonating frequency. It can disrupt the energy flow." "Then do it," Patrick yelled, firing his pulse rifle at the approaching soldiers. Patrick and Rhea coordinated their efforts. Patrick provided cover fire, keeping the soldiers at bay, while Rhea focused her powers, attempting to disrupt the core's energy flow using the resonating frequency. As Rhea focused, the chamber began to shake violently. The energy barriers flickered and sputtered. Cracks appeared in the walls. The soldiers screamed as they were thrown off their feet. Varkus, enraged, unleashed a powerful energy beam from the holographic display, targeting Rhea. Patrick, without hesitation, threw himself in front of her, shielding her with his body. The energy beam struck him full force, sending him flying backwards. Rhea screamed. She looked at Patrick, lying motionless on the floor, his chest smoking. Rage surged through her, eclipsing her fear and exhaustion. She unleashed the full potential of her powers, focusing all her energy on the power core. The core imploded, unleashing a shockwave that ripped through the chamber. The station plunged into darkness. Rhea clawed at Patrick's chest, her hands slick with a mixture of his blood and the acrid fluid leaking from his ruined prosthetic. He wasn't breathing. She pressed her palms against his sternum, channeling what little energy she had left, willing his heart to beat. A cough rattled in his chest, then another. He gasped, a ragged, painful sound. The station's emergency lighting flickered erratically, painting the scene in strobing reds and yellows. Debris littered the corridor, twisted metal, sparking wires spitting miniature lightning bolts and translucent pools of coolant spreading across the deck. The air tasted of ozone and burning flesh. She focused, forcing her powers to extend, to probe. Internal hemorrhaging, fractured ribs. Burns covering a significant portion of his body and his life support. Failing, she had mere minutes. Rhea reached for her comm, desperate to contact the human fleet, but static crackled in her ears. Nothing. The power core's destruction had taken everything with it. Then a faint signal, garbled but distinct. Andromedan. Ority. Essel. Cape. Coordinate. Before she could decipher more, a figure emerged from the smoke-filled corridor. Thorn. Miraculously, he appeared relatively unscathed. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice tight with barely suppressed panic. "Where's Varkus?" Rhea recoiled, a primal instinct screaming at her. She didn't trust him, not now, not ever. "He's gone. Patrick needs help." Thorn gestured impatiently. "We need to secure the station, assess the damage. Varkus could be anywhere." "He will die if I don't help him," Rhea said, her voice low and dangerous. She hefted Patrick's weight, struggling to keep him from sliding. "There was a medical bay. You had schematics." Thorn hesitated, his eyes darting nervously down the corridor. "It's heavily damaged, unsafe." Rhea ignored him, dragging Patrick's limp form. "Then lead the way." The corridors were a gauntlet of hazards. Blown-out bulkheads, sparking conduits, and the occasional, panicked Varkusian soldier, still loyal to their commander. Rhea deflected energy blasts with bursts of telekinetic force, creating makeshift shields of debris while Thorn hung back, offering only token resistance, a well-timed shot here and there. She manipulated the environment, collapsing sections of the ceiling to block their pursuers, twisting handrails into razor-sharp obstacles. Each exertion drained her further, but the thought of Patrick kept her moving. They finally reached the medical bay. The doors hung twisted and half-melted. Inside, the scene was even worse. Medical equipment lay shattered, wires dangled from the ceiling like macabre decorations, and the air reeked of antiseptic and burnt circuits. "Life support," Rhea gasped, her voice raw. She scanned the control panels, her fingers flying across the damaged interfaces. Miraculously, a basic system flickered to life, bathing a small section of the room in a pale, sterile light. She transferred Patrick to a bio bed, her hands moving with desperate efficiency. She channeled her energy, focusing on the most critical injuries, the internal bleeding, the burns. She could accelerate his healing, but only partially. He needed proper medical attention, and they were stranded. Thorn rummaged through the wreckage, his face illuminated by the glow of his data pad. "Here," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Hidden cash, weapons, equipment, and this." He held up a small, cylindrical device, portable energy shield generator. Rhea eyed it warily. "What for?" "Protection," Thorn said, shrugging. "We'll need it." Just then, a distorted image flickered to life on a damaged holographic display. Varkas. His face was contorted with rage. "You think you've won?" He snarled, his voice crackling with static. "I've rerouted power to the secondary cloaking device. By the time the human fleet arrives, I'll be long gone." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Of course, diverting that power will consume all remaining life support, a small price to pay for my freedom." Rhea felt a surge of cold dread. He was going to sacrifice them all. "You can't," she whispered, her voice trembling. Varkas laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Watch me." The transmission cut out. Patrick groaned, his eyes fluttering open. "Rhea." He rasped, his voice weak. "Get out of here, save yourself." "I'm not leaving you," she said, her voice firm. Thorn stepped forward. "There's an engineering bay nearby. We might be able to reroute power." "It's heavily guarded," Thorn continued, "and the radiation shielding is failing. It's a death trap." Rhea closed her eyes, focusing her thoughts. She could sense them, faint, desperate. Survivors trapped in the engineering bay, her grit hardened. "We're going there." "It's suicide," Thorn protested. "Maybe," Rhea said, her eyes blazing with grit, "but we're not leaving them to die." She looked at Thorn. "I need you to reroute the power when we get there." She turned to Patrick. "I'm going to create a diversion. Use the energy shield to draw their fire." Patrick coughed, his face pale with pain, but a flicker of something like pride shone in his eyes. "Good," he croaked. "Use the corridors to your advantage. They'll expect a direct assault. Flank them, hit them hard, hit them fast." He paused, his breath catching in his throat. "Remember your training, Rhea, and trust your instincts." Rhea nodded, her heart pounding. She activated the energy shield, a shimmering blue barrier that enveloped her. She looked at Patrick, his face etched with pain and concern. This was it, her last chance. She had to succeed. Rhea channeled her energy, the andromedan glyphs on her skin glowing with furious light. The makeshift energy shield shimmered, distorting the air around her, a visible wave of defiance against Varkas's occupying force. She charged towards the engineering bay, a one-person storm, the sizzle of disrupted energy and the screams of startled Varkas soldiers echoing in her wake. "Rhea, radiation spikes." Patrick's voice crackled urgently in her comm. "Section 4 Alpha is compromised. Stick to the shielded corridors. Route mapped. Avoid the primary coolant lines." His voice was a lifeline, a calm amidst the chaos. She cut down a pair of Varkas soldiers guarding a junction, the energy shield deflecting their plasma bolts with ease. The air filled with the acrid smell of burning metal and the metallic tang of her own fear. Her powers surged, disorienting the remaining guards with bursts of raw energy, leaving them clutching their heads and collapsing. "Rhea, Thorn is reporting heavy resistance at the south entrance," Patrick said, his voice tight. "He advises against proceeding further that way." Thorn's voice, slain with false concern, cut in. "The bay is swarming, child. Fall back. It's a trap." Rhea hesitated, a knot forming in her stomach. Thorn's intel felt wrong, too convenient. Trusting her instincts, honed by years of survival, she ignored Thorn's warning and veered left, discovering a narrow, dimly lit passage concealed behind a damaged control panel. The air in the passage was thick with dust and the metallic scent of decay. It felt like the station's forgotten veins. The passage opened into a small, barricaded room. Inside, a group of survivors huddled together, their faces gaunt with fear. Among them was a Glarek engineer, his multifaceted eyes wide with a mixture of hope and desperation. "I am Prilorian," he rasped, his voice raspy. "I know the station's power systems." "Varkas has implemented an energy interlock," Prilorian explained, his fingers flying across a holographic display. "A complex sequence prevents rerouting power. He's locked down life support to maintain cloak." Patrick's voice, filtered but clear, broke through. "Prilorian, send me the schematics. I'm seeing a vulnerability in the interlock, a potential bypass. It's risky, but it could restore life support and kill the cloak." Working together, Rhea and Prilorian began to implement Patrick's bypass. Prilorian's nimble fingers danced across the control panel, rerouting power conduits and overriding safety protocols. Sparks flew, and the air crackled with energy. Suddenly, Thorn stumbled into the control room, his uniform torn and his face pale. "Ambush." He gasped. They were everywhere. Rhea narrowed her eyes. Thorn's story didn't add up. There wasn't a scratch on his weapon, and his breathing was too even for someone who had just survived an ambush. As they worked, Prilorian noticed the glyphs on Rhea's skin. "Remarkable," he murmured, his many eyes glinting with interest. "Your energy matrix. It resonates with Andromedan phase technology, knowledge lost to my people for generations." A red alert blared through the station. "Rhea, Varkas knows what you're doing." Patrick's voice was filled with urgency. "He's ordered all remaining forces to the engineering bay. They're cutting off your escape routes." Patrick's voice, a frantic edge creeping in, filled her ear. "Rhea, they're closing in. Prioritize the bypass. Now." Rhea focused, channeling her power into a localized energy surge. The lights flickered and a wave of static filled the air, disrupting Varkas's communication network. "That buys us a few minutes," she said, her voice strained. Prilorian completed the bypass sequence. The station groaned, and a surge of power coursed through the system. Then alarms blared as the system overloaded, the engineering bay shaking violently. "Containment breach," Patrick shouted. "Radiation levels are spiking. Get out of there." The air shimmered, and a metallic taste filled Rhea's mouth. Her vision blurred, and she felt a burning sensation on her skin. "I can't seal it remotely," Patrick yelled, his voice ragged with desperation. "The systems are too damaged." Thorn, his eyes wide with panic, grabbed Rhea's arm. "There's a radiation-shielded escape pod nearby. Come on, you can make it." He didn't look at Prilorian, who was coughing, his skin already beginning to blister. Rhea stared at Thorn, then at Prilorian, struggling to breathe. Her mind raced. Escape, survival. But at what cost? Thorn tugged harder. "Don't be a fool, save yourself." Images flashed through Rhea's mind. The market square, the jeering faces, Patrick's unwavering gaze as he stepped in front of her, his sacrifice, his belief in her. She wrenched her arm free from Orn's grasp. "No." Rhea turned to Prilorian, her eyes filled with tenacity. She focused her power, channeling it into a shimmering energy shield around them, a fragile barrier against the deadly radiation. "I'm not leaving him." Patrick's voice, filled with a mixture of disbelief and fierce pride, echoed in her ear. "Rhea, what are you doing? Get out of there." Rhea ignored him, her eyes locked on Prilorian. "Hold on," she said, her voice trembling but firm. We're not done yet. Gamma radiation spiking. Patrick's fingers danced across the wrist-mounted display, schematics blurring as he zoomed in on various sectors. There, Sector Gamma 9, abandoned robotics lab, radiation shielding intact. It's our best bet. He looked up, his gaze sweeping over Rhea, whose face was pale and drawn. Rhea nodded, her eyes flickering with an ethereal light. She focused, and a beam of pure energy erupted from her hands, vaporizing a mountain of twisted metal and sparking wires that blocked their path. The air crackled, ozone stinging Patrick's nostrils. Rhea stumbled, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her prosthetic arm twitched erratically. "I wouldn't be so hasty," Thorne interjected, his voice oily with concern. "The robotics lab, I've heard reports, unstable structure, better to stay here where it's relatively safe." He avoided Patrick's gaze. Patrick snorted, pulling up holographic blueprints that overlaid the station's decaying structure. "That's bullshit, Thorne. Robotics lab is structurally sound. See these reinforced bulkheads? And the radiation shielding is far superior to this section. We need to move now. The radiation's getting worse." He pointed to a sensor reading flashing ominously on his display. Rhea, her gaze unwavering, met Patrick's eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. She turned to Prilorian, whose skin was already taking on a sickly pallor. Gently she took his arm, supporting his weight. "We go, now." They moved quickly, but the station had other plans. A red laser beam sliced through the air, narrowly missing Patrick's head. He swore, shoving Rhea and Prilorian behind a stack of overturned crates. Automated defense turrets. System overload must have reactivated them. The whirring of servos and the hum of charging weapons filled the corridor. Patrick's fingers flew across his wrist-mounted device, hacking into the turret control system. Turret designation Alpha 7. Weak point, power coupling on the left. Deactivation code 39 Alpha Tango. Rhea focused again, her eyes glowing. Despite her weakened state, she aimed with unwavering precision. A concentrated beam of energy struck the power coupling and the turret sputtered, sparks flying as it fell silent. Rhea gasped, clutching her chest, her face even paler than before. "Try code 72 Delta." Thorne whispered, his voice barely audible above the din. "Rhea, ignore that," Patrick snapped, his eyes narrowed. "Thorne's feeding you false data. Use code 39 Alpha Tango." "That's the correct sequence." He shot Thorne a look of pure suspicion. They disabled the remaining turrets one by one, Rhea's energy reserves dwindling with each shot. Finally, they reached the robotics lab. The heavy door hissed shut, sealing them inside, but the silence was unsettling. The lights flickered once, then died, plunging them into darkness. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. Prilorian, despite his worsening condition, stumbled forward, pointing to a panel on the wall. "The reboot terminal. Over there, but the circuits, damaged, complex sequence." He coughed, a rattling sound that sent a shiver down Patrick's spine. Rhea placed her hands on the terminal, her body trembling. Energy arced across her skin as she manipulated the flow, bypassing the damaged circuits. A guttural cry escaped her lips. With a surge, the lights flickered back on, revealing rows of inactive maintenance robots and blinking diagnostic screens. Patrick rushed to a console, his fingers flying across the controls. "Damn it," he muttered, his face grim. "Rhea, you've absorbed a massive dose of radiation. It's interfering with your powers, making them unstable." Thorne stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with a disturbing intensity. "I told you, her powers. They're not natural, they're a danger to everyone. She needs to be quarantined, for the safety of the station." "That's enough, Thorne," Patrick exploded, his voice raw with anger. "You knew about the turrets, didn't you? You tried to sabotage her, you're the one who's endangering her." Prilorian, his voice weak but urgent, interrupted. "There, in the lab, a prototype, an Andromedan energy regulator. It could stabilize her powers, mitigate the radiation." Patrick's eyes lit up with a spark of hope. "Where?" "But the regulator, it needs Zelosium, Prilorian continued, his voice fading. Only found in the station's core, heavily guarded. Rhea, despite her obvious pain, straightened, her eyes blazing with drive. I have to go. I can control this. I can help. Patrick looked at her, seeing the unwavering determination in her eyes. He knew she was right. She was their only hope. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. All right, we'll get you that Zelosium, but we're doing this my way. There are deactivated maintenance robots here. We can use them as a disguise. It's a long shot, but it's our only chance. Their infiltration of the station's core. Patrick adjusted the bulky maintenance robot chassis, the cold metal a stark contrast to the sweat beading on his forehead. Rhea, crammed into the adjacent unit, shifted uncomfortably. Ready? He murmured over the private comm channel. As I'll ever be, she replied, her voice strained. From the robotics lab, Prilorian's calm voice filled their ears. Remember, stick to the schematics. Automated patrols are on a randomized cycle, but I can reroute them temporarily if needed. Proceed with caution. The tunnels were a labyrinth of pipes, conduits, and flickering emergency lights. Each step echoed unnervingly in the confined space. Patrick consulted the holographic display projected onto his wrist, his prosthetic leg thrumming a dull ache with each movement. The schematics were burned into his memory, a legacy of countless hours spent studying the station's design. Left at the junction, he instructed, guiding Rhea through the maze. Rhea stumbled, her chassis scraping against the tunnel wall. Radiation. It's getting worse, she gasped. Patrick stopped, his hand instinctively reaching for her unit. We need to rest. Now. He found a small alcove barely wider than their chassis and powered down their movement systems. Rhea's robotic head slumped forward. Even through the metal, Patrick could sense her discomfort. Prilorian, status report. Radiation levels are climbing steadily in Sector Gamma. You need to hurry, Prilorian replied, his voice infused with concern. Patrick swore under his breath. They pressed on, the urgency now a palpable weight. As they approached a critical junction point, Patrick noticed a cluster of Varkus's soldiers guarding the intersection. Problem, he whispered. 6 hostiles at the junction. We can't get past them directly. I could try to. Rhea began, Not. Patrick cut her off. No, too risky. I have another idea. He accessed the station's central control system through his wrist console, his fingers flying across the interface. Prilorian, stand by to reroute power. I'm going to trigger a system malfunction. A series of explosions rocked the station, alarms blaring as emergency lights flickered violently. The soldiers at the junction scattered, shouting orders as they tried to assess the damage. In the chaos, Patrick and Rhea slipped past, their robot disguises blending seamlessly with the confusion. Nice work, old man, Prilorian chuckled. But don't get cocky. I'm detecting increased security patrols in your sector. As they rounded a corner, a voice barked, Halt! Maintenance units, identify yourselves. One of the soldiers, his face hardened with suspicion, was pointing a disruptor rifle directly at them. Patrick cursed silently. Their disguises had been compromised. Time to ditch the tin cans, he muttered, activating the release mechanism. The robot chassis fell away, revealing Patrick and Rhea standing exposed in the narrow tunnel. The soldier opened fire. Patrick shoved Rhea behind a stack of crates, returning fire with his pulse pistol. The maintenance tunnels became a chaotic battleground, the air thick with the smell of ozone and burning metal. Patrick, moving with a speed that belied his age and injury, used the tight confines to his advantage, flanking the soldiers and taking them down one by one. Rhea, despite her weakened state, used her powers to disarm and incapacitate the remaining soldiers, telekinetically yanking their weapons from their hands. They reached the vault door, its surface gleaming with an ominous energy. The rare element is behind this, Rhea asked, her voice barely a whisper. Protected by a high-energy shield, Patrick confirmed, scanning the door with his optical implants. Your powers won't be enough to penetrate it in your condition. He discovered a manual override terminal, its screen displaying a complex access code. "Damn it," he muttered. "Requires Varkus's personal authorization. We're locked out." Suddenly, Rhea gasped, clutching her head. "He's here. Nearby, I can feel him. He's watching us." The station's comm system crackled to life. "Impressive, Patrick," Varkus's voice dripped with amusement. "I must admit you've exceeded my expectations, but this is where your little game ends." "Varkus," Patrick growled. "I should have known you were behind this." "Indeed, I allowed you to reach this point to test your willpower and to lure you into a trap." Varkus paused, then continued, his voice taking on a more persuasive tone. "But I am not without compassion. I am willing to offer you a deal. Hand over the Andromedan child and I will spare your life. I will even grant you safe passage off this station." Patrick spat on the floor. "I wouldn't trust you as far as I could throw you. I will never betray Rhea. And I will stop you, Varkus. I will stop you from using her powers for your own twisted ends." Varkus laughed, a cold, chilling sound that echoed through the tunnels. "Brave words, human, but you are in no position to bargain." The vault door slammed shut, sealing them inside. Alarms blared as the station's defense systems activated. "I am now initiating a level 5 quarantine. The vault is sealed and the maintenance tunnels will be flooded with lethal radiation within minutes. Consider this your final resting place." Rhea slumped against the vault door, her face pale and drawn. "There's no way out," she whispered. "But I can overload the vault's energy core. It will destroy the element and stop him from getting it. But it will also destroy me." "No." Patrick roared, grabbing her shoulders. "There has to be another way. I won't let you sacrifice yourself." He began frantically searching the vault for an alternative escape route, his mind racing. "Patrick," Prilorian's voice crackled over the comm. "I've been monitoring the station's schematics. There's a hidden emergency escape route leading from the vault to a nearby abandoned mining shuttle. It's not on the standard maps, but I found a reference in some old maintenance logs." "Then get it open," Patrick yelled, his voice filled with desperation. "It's heavily damaged," Prilorian replied. "It requires a precise energy surge to activate the release mechanism. Something Rhea is too weak to perform on her own." Patrick's eyes darted around the vault, landing on a series of power conduits running along the ceiling. An idea sparked in his mind, a desperate gamble born of desperation and ingenuity. "Prilorian, can you reroute power from the station's main grid to these conduits?" "It's risky, Patrick," Prilorian warned. "It could overload the system and trigger a catastrophic chain reaction." "We don't have a choice," Patrick shouted. "Rhea, can you channel your powers through those conduits? Amplify the energy surge." Rhea nodded weakly, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and persistence. "I'll try." Radiation levels were climbing rapidly, the air growing heavy and thick. Varkus's voice echoed through the comm system, taunting them with their impending doom. "Any last words, human? Any regrets?" Patrick ignored him, focusing on Rhea. "Ready?" he asked, his voice calm and steady despite the chaos swirling around them. Rhea took a deep breath, closing her eyes. "Ready." Patrick accessed the station's power grid, rerouting energy to the conduits. The vault filled with a blinding light as Rhea channeled her powers, amplifying the surge. The conduits vibrated violently, the air crackling with energy. "Now!" Patrick yelled. Rhea unleashed her full power, a wave of energy surging through the conduits and into the escape route's release mechanism. The vault shook violently as the hidden door groaned open, revealing a dark, narrow passage. "Go, Rhea, go," Patrick urged, pushing her towards the opening. They were trapped, radiation poisoning setting in, but with a chance, a slim chance, that human ingenuity and Andromedan power combined could snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. He hoped that Prilorian would be able to find them once they had escaped the core. Patrick cursed, his fingers flying across the damaged console, rerouting power conduits. The station groaned around them, a dying beast shedding its metallic skin. Radiation alarms blared, a constant, irritating whine. Almost there, Rhea, just need to bypass this. Damn, overload regulator. He could feel the heat intensifying, the air thick with the metallic tang of ozone. His prosthetic thrummed, a phantom ache mirroring the real pain in his chest. Success depended on pinpoint timing, on his fractured knowledge of both human and Andromedan engineering. A volley of laser fire erupted from the corridor. Varkus's security drones, their lenses glowing red, swarmed towards them. Rhea, behind me, Patrick yelled, drawing his sidearm. He fired back, each shot precise, each movement economical. He danced between cover, calibrating the energy flow with one hand while returning fire with the other. Sweat stung his eyes. His breath came in ragged gasps. Rhea stood behind him, her small frame trembling. But it wasn't fear that shook her, it was power. Her skin shimmered with an otherworldly light, violet veins pulsing beneath her translucent skin. The air crackled around her, charged with raw energy. She clenched her fists, fighting to control the torrent surging within. Her eyes glowed with an intensity that threatened to consume her. A catastrophic overload would destroy them all. A section of the emergency escape route ahead buckled, showering them with sparks and debris. The tunnel entrance was blocked. Damn it all, Patrick roared, assessing the damage in a split second. He grabbed a discarded energy cutter, its power fluctuating wildly. Rhea, cover me. I need to reroute the tunnel supports. He worked feverishly, the cutter spitting arcs of blue energy, the smell of burning metal filling the air. His prosthetic leg slipped on the uneven surface, nearly sending him sprawling. Varkus emerged from the smoke, his face contorted with rage. You can't protect her, human. Her power belongs to the collective. She will bring glory to our people. He raised a weapon, its barrel aimed directly at Rhea. Patrick hurled himself forward, a desperate act of defiance. He slammed into Varkus, knocking the weapon aside, absorbing the brunt of the impact on his cybernetic leg. Pain exploded through his body, but he held on tight, shielding Rhea with his own flesh and blood and metal. Rhea gasped, her eyes widening in horror. She saw the pain etched on Patrick's face, the unwavering dedication in his eyes. This human, this flawed, scarred veteran was willing to sacrifice himself for her. A wave of emotion crashed over her: gratitude, protectiveness, and something she hadn't felt before: love. The moral implications of her power slammed into her with the force of a supernova. Was she a weapon to be controlled? Or a force for good? The answer resonated within her, clear and undeniable. She focused her energy, channeling it with newfound precision. The violet light intensified, but this time it was controlled, directed. She unleashed a focused burst of energy, a precise beam that struck Varkus's weapon, disarming him instantly. He crumpled to the ground, incapacitated but alive. They scrambled towards the abandoned mining shuttle, the station groaning its final death throes. Alarms screamed, lights flickered, and the air grew thick with radiation. They barely made it inside before the docking clamps released, sending them hurtling into the black void. A modified rescue ship, cobbled together from spare parts and ingenuity, appeared on their scanner. Perlorian's gruff voice crackled over the comms. About time. I was starting to think I'd have to explain your absence to the mess cooks, again. His arrival, unexpected and timely, was a testament to their unlikely friendship. Back on the station, the atmosphere had shifted. The crowds that once hurled insults now parted, their faces etched with a mixture of awe and shame. They had witnessed courage, sacrifice, and the undeniable power of compassion. Hesitantly, tentatively, the community began to reach out to Rhea. A child offered her a flower. An elder offered a nod of respect. They were beginning to see her not as a symbol of the enemy, but as an individual, a child who had suffered and triumphed. Patrick watched, his heart swelling with hope. He had found a new purpose, a reason to fight beyond the ghosts of his past. He would dedicate himself to protecting Rhea, to fostering dialogue between humans and Andromedans, to building a future where prejudice was a relic of a bygone era. Years later, the station was a hub of collaboration, a testament to the power of unity. Humans and Andromedans worked side by side, sharing knowledge, building a better future together. The scars of the war remained, but they were fading, replaced by the promise of understanding. But the cost of peace was never forgotten. Patrick and Rhea often found themselves gazing at the stars, remembering those who had sacrificed everything. Their paths were forever intertwined, bound by the shared memories of loss, courage, and the unwavering belief that even in the darkest of times, hope could still bloom.